Leave your ego at the door and get ready to be raw. This is Strength to Overcome, where real men find their strength in weakness. Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. I'm Ryan here with my co-host Matt, and we're coming at you with episode 18 this week. Pumped to be here. And Matt, I'm glad to have you back beside me here, brother, at least on the screen.
Yeah, mate. I was thinking the other day as I was buzzing around Ubering in Tampa, it tried to zip me over to your coast with this, $100 fare. I'm like, it looks good when it pops up. Oh, go make $100. It's like, yeah, you be sitting in the car for 3.5 hours to get there, and then 3.5 hours to get back. So I'm like, it's really not that great, except I could have popped in and seen you guys. So next time I get a fare that pops up to the East Coast beach area, I'm going to take it and just say, hey, man, I'm coming in hot.
Man, I'm surprised that was only $100. That's a long haul.
That's why I didn't take it. No,
Yeah.
no offense to you, but I'm like, hell no. I don't think it's worth it in gas.
So I get, yeah, you don't have to, you have to make the decision because you don't get paid for getting back. So you have to decide up front, is this route, is this fare going to take me somewhere where I can pick up from or not, or do I want to be that far away from where I was, right?
The funniest thing that ever happened to me was the first time I started Ubering, and I was buzzing around and I was, getting these fares and, getting excited because you're making, small chunks of change. I think we talked about it last week, right? And I was heading back to Bradenton, where I live. I was probably maybe, 45 minutes to an hour from home, and I see this 80-something dollar fare pop up, right? And so, I'd been doing fares for like $6, $11, $4, like just these little ones. And so this was my first day, and I saw this 80-something dollar fare pop up. And for those that don't understand how it works, you're driving, you've got this app, and the fare pops up with this pickup location and drop off location. And then there's this little sand timer looking thing at the bottom that counts down. And as soon as it runs out of sand, the ride is gone. It just disappears. And so, you're flying along at 70 miles an hour. You see at the corner of your eye this fare or this ride that pops up, and you've got this pressure not just to either accept or decline, but to beat everybody else out there that's got a quicker finger and wants the ride. And so, I saw it, I was pumped, I was excited, I click accept. I follow the directions to the pickup point, because once you've clicked it, you can't see where it's going, right? And so I follow the directions to the pickup location, and I pull up, and I've got, I think it was 6 of them. There were 6 black girls on a bachelorette journey, right, to Orlando Airport. And I'm like, no, like, I didn't even know what to do, right? They're piling their suitcases into this sports van that I have, and they're all, having fun and getting excited. And I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, like, I have no idea how the hell am I going to pull this off, because Heather had to go to work, and, I had a specific time that I needed to be back by. And so I look at the distance, and it was like, an hour and 45 minutes to Orlando from where I was. And then I'm thinking, well, then it's going to be a 2-hour drive back. I looked at my watch, and I'm like, I don't have a watch, but I looked at the time, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have exactly 4 hours to get these girls to Orlando Airport and then hoof it back. Well, of course, this was a long weekend, and we get into this journey, and they've got their music plugged into my stereo. They're, just the cliche classic music they're playing. They're hollering and they're having a blast. And, they're absolutely stuffed. We've got suitcases everywhere, and we're flying down towards Orlando, and then we hit the bottleneck of traffic. And all of a sudden, my GPS on the Uber recalibrates, and now I'm still 2.25 hours out after driving an hour, right? I'm like, there is no way they're going to miss their flight. Now, that's not my fault that they cut it that tight, but, they're hollering at me like, a movie, as you can imagine. And they're hollering at it, go faster, go around the side, go up the emergency lane, go this way, go that way. And I'm like, I'm just worried about getting back so Heather can make her shift at Costco. And someone's got look after the kids. And so I'm absolutely flying. I'm in and out. I'm weaving. I mean, you got this sports van just, doing Mach 10 up this highway, trying to get them there in time. I pull into the airport after, nearly 3 hours of driving on freaking two wheels. And, they're probably thinking like, man, this guy hustled for us. I'm like, yeah, I hustled for you guys, but also got to get back. So, I come in on two wheels. I fling them out the sunroof. Suitcases are flying everywhere. They all jump out. They're hollering. They're taking off trying to make it before the gate closes themselves. And then I look and I've got like an hour and 30 minutes to, drive 2.5 hours back. And I did some creative driving on the way home. I don't want to get myself into too much trouble here, but I certainly took the sports van up a few emergency lanes, up the exit areas. I mean, it was just absolute chaos. I pull into Costco. I called Heather and said, "Hey, meet me there, right? I'm going to be like down to the minutes here, right?" So I come flying into Costco on two wheels. Kids come flying out of her car, land in mine. She walks in, clocks in with a minute to spare. It was a fantastic first day experience of Ubering when I did this. It was only later on that I realized that there's a section you can go into that you can click on, and it says cancel ride. And there's about a dozen reasons you can pick. Ride's not worth it. I've got a vehicle issue, whatever. There's like a dozen options. And I didn't know it at the time. And so I did this 5 hour, Orlando ride for 80 some bucks minus gas. I probably made nothing. And then on the way back, I'm like, you know what? I didn't even tip.
Uh,
It was a great experience when I did that first ride, or that first day and that first big ride. Our eyes light up at making money when you're in that position, trying to, provide. And I probably didn't even make minimum wage doing it. So that was my first day, a while back doing this. And Ubering is not for the faint of heart as a passenger or a driver, because you really don't know what you're going to get into. And that was a horrifying experience, and now I've learnt to cancel rides and get out of Dodge before I get stuck driving like I almost did across to your coast, just to say, hey, when I would have made like, $8 an hour. Long story there, but that's the world I'm living in right now with this frozen shoulder, busted arm, and trying to figure it out. So give me your update on your end, mate.
yeah, it's definitely not as exciting as your Uber life, that's for sure. Like we were just talking offline, I'm trying to figure out what day of the week it is and keep track of that over here. We're just getting our schedule in line, and little baby Callan is growing fast. And as soon as I said he was sleeping through the night, he stopped sleeping through the night. So he's waking up at like 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. So at least he only wakes up once or so. But yeah, it was like the moment I said that he decided to not sleep through the night. But it's we're just kind of trying to grab our sleep when we can, figure out the schedule, who's covering what, and it's a lot of, like you've experienced for many years now. It's a lot of who's covering this and who's doing this when and how and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what my life's like right now.
Now, we talked a little bit last week about you finding value and in your role, which obviously will be continuously rewarding your entire life. But have you been able to tap into some of the things that meet your needs along the way to try and find balance?
Not too much this week. It's been a little bit of a grind, kind of just day in, day out, and trying to manage sleep and just figure everything out. So that's been kind of the gist of it this week so far.
Yeah, I don't envy you there, mate. I actually, a week ago, I took a lady for a ride, and we got chatting, and she was from out of the state and going to see her parents, and so I swapped to gave her a business card, and she ended up texting me and said, "Hey, would you be able to come and get me? I'm flying out." And I always like to say yes, right? Be that person that's available to people and help them out. And of course, it's like, what time do you need me? She's like, well, I need you to pick me up at 4. I'm like, a.m. Like, you gotta be kidding me. And it was just this great moment of realization that once you've said yes and you're going to do something, it's kind of good to follow through, right? Uh, because you want to be needed. I think it's important. I know for me, I like to be needed. I don't think that makes me needy. I just think, given my circumstances of being in this situation 4 or 5 months now, I'm looking for something where I feel needed. And so, sure enough, I did it. So, I've set the alarm for 3:30 this morning. And of course, you know what that means. When you set your alarm for 3:30 and you're somebody's ride to the airport, you wake up at 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. You're like, oh, your brain, says, you've overslept and they're stranded. And, I kind of wondered as I was driving there this morning at 3:30 in the morning, I'm thinking, man, why did I do this? Why would I have said yes to something that really, it's not worth the money, because after that, I've dropped her off and, now who's up at 4:30 in the morning for the next ride, right? No one. I kind of had to wrestle with why am I doing that? Why am I saying yes? And I think it's this continuous drive in me. And, I'd like to hear from your angle too, as to, being needed, being able to say yes, being wanted. How have you found being at the top as a PGA professional, having your own businesses? Now you're needed, but it's a different kind of need that you're experiencing, right? How have you handled not being needed, or do you feel needed in your current role?
No, it's a weird feeling now, right? Because there's no communication really back and forth between a baby and I. So there's no asking, there's no praise, there's no thank you, that sort of thing. So it struggle a little bit to feel needed, even though I know I am needed in a lot of ways. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from on the Ubering side of things with wanting to say yes and wanting to be there, and it gives you a sense of kind of fulfillment in a way to be able to be the one to make it happen for somebody, even though you're technically off the clock, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're in that position where, I know you just said, there's no communication, and the funniest thing is that as they get older, you'll realize that you guys are communicating and it just doesn't feel like it because their communication is, screaming and hollering and burping and farting and I mean, they're communicating in the only ways that he knows. And being able to pick up on that so that you can communicate back to him. Your energy is communicating to him, and your tone, your touch. It's an amazing feeling that he's getting, but you're not getting that immediate satisfaction of being needed. And so, do you feel like you're getting it from anywhere else? That feeling of acceptance.
No, not really. That's probably one of the bigger things right now is don't really have that feeling anywhere coming from any place. It was a little bit with the TPC thing because I was the one that had to set up the driving range at 6 a.m. in the morning, and that they were counting on me to be there and to set it up for the golfers for the day. And that was it's like, all right, I'm needed in that way. But now that that's in the past and gone, there's nothing really to take its place at the moment. So yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, I mean, for those that don't know or picking up on this episode for the first time, we're talking about you working at TPC, one of the premier golf facilities and courses in the world, and you're setting it up for PGA professionals that are playing and competing on the tour and such. And so, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, hey, listen, if I was the one showing up to play here or practice here, this is where I would want to see things lined up. I'd want things, nice and neatly lined up and straight and, little stacks of, see those pyramids of balls and, you'd want that. And so you kind of probably went above and beyond to make sure that these guys show up going, man, who the hell did this? Oh, there's that guy Ryan, right? I mean, was there a bit of that going on in the back of your mind?
Yeah, you definitely take a little bit of pride when you're in a situation like that and at a facility like that. You're gonna work a little bit tougher to get things right and make it special.
Yeah, I think that if you could find something where you feel that needed, I mean, are we talking about a dopamine hit here, or is this just a human nature type thing, you think?
Yeah, it might be the dopamine effect that we've talked about before of wanting to get that hit, whether it comes from, you know, a job or a click on the phone or a sip of a drink or, an image on a computer. It's that dopamine hit is probably what we're referring to, right?
Yeah, I think we've, talked a lot about that in the past. And I'm 5 months in now to, a new life, as I would describe it, and the changes. And every day, as I've mentioned, I get up and I go for a walk, and first words out of my mouth, nearly every morning are, thank you for this torn bicep. And, the reason I share that every morning and thank him is because, I believe that, this is changing the course of my life. And I was listening to a book today, one I think I've shared with you, called Good Inside, about kids and such. And it talks about the fact that we are good inside, and we have needs, but we handle our needs poorly in the world, and we, find ways to satisfy those needs ourselves if they're not being met. And, I found over the last 5 months myself, I've felt an enormous sense of rejection from things, your circumstances around me, people around me, and I've really struggled with that, particularly over the last probably 6 weeks where I've started to, get on LinkedIn and be applying for some jobs. And I even had a conversation with a furniture company. I'm like, what the hell? I'm good with people, right? Let's just click apply, right? And got the call. Obviously, I've got a pretty good resume for a position like that. And so, of course, you get the call, and, within 5 minutes, I've been turned down because I wouldn't be able to move a lamp from one side of the store to the other to help a customer find their perfect, suite, because of my arm. And I'm going to be honest about it. I'm not going to walk in and try and hide that. And I've just found myself over the last, 6 weeks or so since turning down that California offer, rejection after rejection after rejection. And I've really struggled to find a purpose when I keep getting just, kick back, kick back, kick back. And, even working at a local training studio that, I had my eye on, may not pan out. And it's like, man, even the thing that I'm really good at, I've had a really good career at, I can't even break into that, So kind of in that position where I'm trying to find, okay, so where do you want me, And I think that as men, I think this is where the tipping point can kick in, where your brain starts to say, "Hey, why don't you do the thing you've always done? Have the sip, look at some images, take care of, some tension release there, or, gamble, or, we've had guests on the show that have talked about their weaknesses and such, right? But whatever it is, your brain starts to say, listen, you're going through a really rough time. You're getting knocked back left, right, and center. You can't even get a job. You're Ubering for crying out loud at 3:30 in the morning. Why don't you just do this to cope, right? And I think that's where a lot of people have found themselves just through a random series of events, and they hit that space and they fall back. And generally speaking, the fall back is deeper and darker than it was previously. Have you kind of been in that position before?
Yeah, yeah. I think the rejection thing is big time. It's for a lot of people. It was there, big when I was trying to sell my gym. I approached probably 7 or 8 different parties asking if they were, interested in purchasing the gym and the business. And, I kept getting rejection after rejection for one reason or another. And I remember that being very frustrating slash kind of dejecting to face that rejection and feel like, oh, this thing I've got isn't worth anything. It's all gonna just fall on me and stay with me, and I'm going to be stuck with it forever type of deal after having, conversation after conversation after conversation over, different things. So the rejection piece is big, and I think it's something we deal with all throughout our lives from, a young age up through death, right? It's I can remember, in the dating scene, dealing with rejection and school, rejection at school and, the the toll it takes there and in all different walks, it can kind of rear out and tackle you.
Did you find, for me, school was weird. In Australia, we go from kindergarten to sixth grade, and then you're in high school from seventh to 12. There's no middle school here in Australia, rather. And I remember being the sportsman of the year in my sixth grade. It's like, small school, but still fastest, best at sport. Our version of baseball, cricket, footy. I was, good hand-eye. I mean, I was pretty talented sixth grader there. And then, you go to high school and you're a seventh grader and there's kids walking around with beards, you know, because there's seniors, 12th graders. And I remember that being a really hard time for me. I was bullied. I was picked on. I was a runt, you know. I'm, 6 foot change now, but I didn't grow until I left school, after the 10th grade. And so I always look back on that and like, man, that was a really tough time. I wonder if that's what drove me into the training where I get to, correct and guide and mold and not bully clients, but in a way, you're really pushing them to their limits. And I sort of would tap into that a lot. Is that something that you went through or is that
Yeah,
separate?
yeah, yeah. I was, kind of dealt with the normal bullies that you'd find in middle school for sure. The sixth, seventh, eighth grade here, and dealing with that, and plus all your hormones during that time are all out of whack. Things are changing, and it's just a wild time. So not, with the emotions going through your head, and then the rejection, if you'll call it that, that you're dealing with in the outside world day to day, it's tough, man.
Yeah, I think that there were times in the lower grades where I probably picked on kids because I was the biggest and fastest and not biggest, but, strongest and, best at sports. And of course, in school, the kid that's good at sports is, always picked first or the school captain, that type of character. And so, there's this just drop off. And I just remember it being a really tough time. And all of a sudden you're a nobody. It's funny as I'm going through this phase in my life now where I'm trying to reinvent myself and find what's next. You start to look back and I mean, we're talking, 30 plus years ago now, where you go through that phase of being rejected and now it's like, holy crap, I mean, does it ever really change? Now you're just being rejected as an adult because I don't have a BS in marketing and sales. And it's quite funny as I pour through some of these LinkedIn positions that have been posted. It's like, man, you read the job description of what you'd have to do, and you just get excited. You're like, man, work with a team, hire your own staff, kind of, management roles, and get into, growing something that's, maybe just started, or they need to expand and they need someone to take over a location, kind of thing. And you're reading through this thing, you're like, man, I love it. This is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. This looks fantastic. I've got all those skills. I've had my own business. I've had my own gym. I've been in big businesses and hired and fired and, done really well in sales, great experiences there. And, spent decades in the art of working with people. And then you get to the requirements and it's, a BS in marketing and sales. It's like done. And so you kind of look at it and you're like, man, without even applying for it, you've just been rejected because I don't have a piece of paper that says I've got 20 plus years experience doing it. But, some young kid, early 20s is going to show up with a piece of paper and he's going to get an interview, but, may not have the life experiences. And so even before I get in front of someone, kickback after kickback, even though these positions look great and sound great, I don't even get a word in. And so I've just spent so much time looking at these things thinking, okay, where do I go from here? And you're probably feeling that too with your career, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's tough because when you face those rejections, you're always going to be telling yourself some sort of story around why the rejection happened. It's usually it is up to you to tell the story or make a story out of it. Because the rejection happened, that's the fact of the matter. But then your brain has to create the story to support it and go around it. And so that's where things can spiral out of control pretty quickly, right? Is when you start telling yourself the story of, oh, I'm not good enough, or this, I made a huge mistake back then not doing this or not doing that, or you know, people just don't like me because of this, this thing that, I say or do, or this trait that I have. And you start creating this whole like world of a story around the rejection that can then mold your next rejection and mold your behavior and your response to that. And it's just like it's almost like a snowball picking up speed going downhill.
Wow, I mean, that's just beautifully put. That needs to be a snippet that we release because I'm actually was sitting here getting chills because you've literally described it to the point where now I'm almost walking into every interaction thinking, what are they going to find wrong with me now? You know,
Yeah.
and you can carry that into your marriage. You can carry that into your parenting, in interactions with strangers, and you put off an energy, and then you get that energy back. And I've found myself really battling that lately. So you've kind of just blown my brain here. I need a second to regroup.
It's almost like you have to be the storyteller in your own world, right? To be able to spin it. The people, I guess that's what makes such great salesmen in general, is they're able to handle a rejection and not build a story that hinders their next attempt or their next sale, and move forward with it. Where, someone like me, I can only handle so much rejection, and it's going to be the end of it, or I'm going to go a different direction, or I'm gonna have some story built up in my head that's just gonna debilitate me and paralyze me, right? But I think the most successful people out there are the ones that are able to really keep the narrative under their control and spin it in their favor.
I'm curious, do you think, or how do you tell the difference between, a divine power that is creating rejections or influencing rejections because there's a path that you're meant to take or you haven't found yet versus no, keep pushing, this is meant to be what you do. How do you find the difference between the two?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's goes back to part of the storyline, I guess, that you're telling yourself, right? Is if you're gonna tell yourself that it's meant to be and spin it that way, it can work in your favor. And if you fall victim to some of the other stories that you can spin, it can really dig yourself a hole in the ground and kind of bury yourself right where you sit.
Yeah, and I think that, to lend to the journey that I'm on, I found myself really drawn to leaning into these rejections. I've obviously shared that it's been tough, and that's because I'm meant to be the provider and the kids want to wrestle, and I'm still trying to be a great husband, and I'm limited in all my areas that I'm struggling with. But I found myself leaning into the rejections, and there's a part of the book today that talk about, listen, you're trying to get from where you are, where you don't know something, to knowing something, right? So it might be, to use an example that you'd know well, you get a client that back as a PGA teaching pro, you'd probably get someone that shows up and never hit a golf ball in their life, and they want to get to the point where they could get around the golf course and enjoy the game. But you as a professional can look at that and say, right, this is what we need to do. Let's be patient. Let's take our time. Let's just work on your grip, right? This is how you hold the club. Let's not worry about what club to hit or how far it's going to go or any of that sort of stuff. But let's just work on this. And you as a professional know how to break that down to help that person get from where they are to knowing something. And the book talks about, hey, listen, as parents, it's not our job to help them get from where they are to knowing something as fast as humanly possible. We think that that's the goal, right? Get success now. I think I loved this part of the book because it talked about, hey, it's our job as parents to help our children stay in that zone of being okay, constantly learning, right? Being comfortable in that place that sometimes takes your whole life to learn, right? Something else might be, hey, we could pick this up in a day, but being in a place where you're in constant learning mode is our job as parents until they're equipped to go out into the world, and then they'll always still come back and seek that counsel if you've done a good job, right? But I really was moved by that because I find myself asking a lot. I'm praying. I'm like, what are you, you seem to be closing all the doors, except Ubering, which, I'm going to blow my car up here. It's got so many miles on it, it's falling apart. I'm like, this, Ubering full time can't be the answer, right? But you're shutting down pretty much all the other doors that I thought were there. And when I heard that part of the book today as I was driving home on a long drive home, I was like, wow, maybe I'm just in that phase where I'm being encouraged to just be in a phase of learning and be okay with not having the answer yet. Because I think we live in this microwave society where we get to click and buy it now and it's here that afternoon, or hey, I want to research or know this, let me just watch a video and I know it. And we don't ever actually go through the grind, which you've used that word earlier today. And I think for me at least, I found myself at peace that, wow, maybe this is just a season of learning. How do you feel about that? I don't know if you've read that part of the book or if you're coming up to it.
No, that's good. Yeah, I mean, it's if you can stay in that learning phase, right, especially as you're dealing with and facing rejection, I think that can be huge. If you view it as a learning experience, yeah, I'm sure folks have heard that said quite a lot. Like, what did you learn from this, or what does this teach you? And if you can stay in that mindset around rejection in general, then I think you can kind of piggybacking off what we said earlier. I think you can spin the story in your favor and kind of move forward from there and continue to grow, continue to learn.
Have you been able to do that stepping away from golf? What does that look like? Because, I know that probably tugs at you a little bit, having been a golf pro and now you're not, right? So, I mean, help me understand that aspect because I'm sure you look at these guys and think, well, that could have been me.
Yeah, being around some of the club pros and PGA professionals, especially like the ones at TPC Sawgrass, it was kind of like, yeah, that could have been me type of deal. So it's definitely it's tough to look back, 11 years ago and look at the decision I made to change careers and change paths and look at where it's led me now. But it's also crazy because I wouldn't have anything I have now if I hadn't have made that decision. Everything's kind of led to this point. So it goes both ways. And again, it goes back to the story, right? You can spin the story against yourself, or you can spin it to where, it was meant to be, and it was the best thing for me. I think that's the theme of the day today is just what story are you telling yourself in the face of all that rejection that you're gonna face in life.
Yeah, and I think that, as I've Ubered a lot of people lately, I picked up this guy the other day, must have been a mile ride. I was downtown Tampa and must have been a mile ride. And, sometimes you can get a lot within, 4 or 5 minutes. And I was talking to this guy, just going through a horrible time. Hadn't seen his kid for a long time, just going through a really rough spot. And man, I pulled up to drop him off and I turn around and, we hadn't had a long enough time for me to share my situation. I said, hey man, I get it. I, tore my bicep 4 or 5 months ago now and had immediate surgery and my entire life has just come completely unglued. And he rolls up his sleeve and he points to a scar on his arm. And I immediately recognized that he had also had a torn bicep and had surgery. Immediately knew it. And it just moved me because he looked at me, I looked at him, and it was like, wow. I mean, I picked this guy up for a 1 mile ride, maybe in the car for 3, 4 minutes, and was like, wow, okay, you know what? Been there, done that, right? And it was just a moment where we just kind of looked at each other and sort of said, hang in there, things are going to get better. And, I don't know if I'll ever cross paths with him again, right? It's happened. I've picked up the same passenger twice from different places out of the blue. And it's like, wait a minute, I've seen you. And it can happen. But it was just this moment of the universe just saying, hey, hang in there. You're not the only one that's had a torn bicep or had your life come unglued, right? It's going to be all right. You're going to bounce back. Your arm's going to work again. And I think sometimes we just get those little reminders hey, I've got a plan. It's okay. I'm in control. Things are going to work out, but just stay strong. You're not there yet. You got to keep going through it. And I'm leaning into it and getting stronger every day. And I know that when the time comes and I'm ready, the right opportunity is going to come my way for this, to be part of my story, my journey, and help others. And I know you've been through rejection and with the golfing too, right? Didn't you try and get back into it recently or looked at that?
Yeah, I kind of dipped my toe into trying to get back at a new and opening golf course here in town, and of course the first thing they asked was, what's your PGA status? And so I had to tell them that I used to have it, don't have it anymore, and here's why, and here's what the situation is, and so that was, kind of that awkward back and forth of, oh yeah, you're not actually qualified for what we're looking for type of deal. And so it was a little bit of a, swift kick in the teeth of just like, yep, you gave that up, and here's some of the repercussions of giving that up is you no longer have the luxury to just go hop on and apply for a golf job and be able to slide into it anymore.
Yeah, I think we're still really at that cusp. I think the audience and some of the people we know are probably going to be watching this going, man, where are these guys going to end up? Where's this story going? And how long will they be in this phase? And for those that, you know, going through it, my encouragement to someone, if I heard this story, would be, lean into it, just keep on plugging through, right? Don't fall back into the very things that this journey has brought you from, right? Don't go back. Don't look back. Burn the boats, you know? I know you know that phrase well, and, you know, don't don't fall back into the old ways that you feel are part of the old you, right? And I've been excited by the ability to stay strong on my new journey and to not fall back into the old addictions. And every day that I get rejected and I don't do something stupid that the old Matt would have done, I feel like, man, you're getting stronger. It may not look like it, and I've got my right arm with all this saggy skin and my bones visible. I'm like got this right dominant arm of mine looking like, an 80-year-old lady's. No disrespect to anyone of those that are listening, because I literally have that sort of looking arm right now. And people look at me and they go, "You're a carpenter? You're a trainer?" Like, yeah, I don't think so. You look ridiculous. And, so I've just got to lean into that and be like, you know what? That's okay. Something bigger is coming. It doesn't mean it's not as a carpenter or not in the fitness industry. It just means it's not yet, right? And it could be any day now. It could be any second.
Yeah.
But I'm encouraged by leaning into it. How are you holding up? And we can wrap this up. But I want to hear, how are you holding up as you go through this grind that you've mentioned? How are you holding up? This is the accountability phase of the episode here. From where we started, you shared a testimony about what you've been through. How are you holding up on that right now?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Still kind of taking it day by day and getting through. So it's been good.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, mate, because it's important for you and yourself, right? As they say, if the plane goes down, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. And so it's
Yeah.
important for you and me and anyone else trying to help others to look after yourself first. So, I'm going to keep asking. It's not meant to be nagging, but it's meant to be accountability. And I want to make sure that you're on track and keeping it together. And I expect the same back, as we go through this. So I appreciate, all the texts. I think you and I have texted quite a lot this week behind the scenes, and it's been a huge help to me, I tell you that. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think that's all we got for this week, man. That's a good one about rejection, handling rejection.
Yeah, it's not a lot of fun, but I'm looking forward to having a few guests. I've got a few people I've been talking to that I want them to share their story, and so I'm really excited. Hopefully we can line, maybe a couple of them back to back and really just dive in on some journeys that others have been through, and we want to hear from everyone, right? And connect and subscribe and emails. Like, let's build this thing, right? I know it's taken time, and I just keep on feeling like we're on the cusp of reaching people, because everyone I talk to in the Uber, they're like, man, that's a great idea, I love it, we need that. But we've just got to be so willing to be open and vulnerable to break into that community mindset. I'm just going to keep on asking people to do it for us, and do it for yourself first of all, but do it to help others, right? If you just save one, that's all it really could be, right?
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you next week. Like, subscribe, like Matt said. Send us an email, info.strengthtoovercome@gmail.com. Happy to hear from you. And if you have any thoughts on, what a nice topic would be for us to cover one week, or if you want to have a guest, if you have a guest that you think might do well on the show, and we'd love to hear their story, then hit us up with that and let us know.
Absolutely, I'd love that. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Ryan, stay strong, mate. Always a pleasure. I go away from here pumped, and that's why we're trying to build a community, because I feel great after this, and I hope you get something out of it too.
Absolutely. All right, brother. We'll catch you next week.
All right, cheers, mate.